Hello there, everyone, and welcome to the Real Life Practice Podcast. I'm Teresa McCloy.
And I'm Lindsay Sturkey, and we are excited to welcome you into our conversation about what it means to practice our faith in our ordinary, everyday life. In each season of the podcast, we explore a different spiritual practice together that will help us connect with God and become more of who He has created us to be.
We love talking about spiritual growth, exploring life story, and discovering how to pay attention to God in the ordinary and the extraordinary moments of the day. And this season, we're talking about the practice of retreat and how the invitation to get away and create space for connection with God. So, welcome into the conversation. And today we get to welcome two very special guests into that conversation as well. So, Joan and Gail, welcome to the Real Life Practice Podcast.
Thank you.
It's good to be here. Lindsay, I'm going to turn it over to you as you welcome our guests in, and we have some great conversation today.
Absolutely. As we said, we've been talking about the spiritual practice of retreat and what that is and what that means for our life with God. And so we wanted to bring Joan Kelley and Gail Donahue on the podcast because this is a practice that not only do they experience in their lives, but they actually have a ministry and an organization that invites others into that space, which we will share more about that as the episode goes along. But just to start, Joan, will you introduce yourself to our listeners just so they know a bit of who you are?
It's just great to be here, first of all. But I'm Joan Kelley. I'm married to John. We live in Palatine, a northwest suburb of Chicago. And we have 4 kids. And that is one of the, or 2 of the roles that I have. But I truly believe that I have been, I guess I would say, called by God to help people connect to the dots on their story and be a companion on that journey. And what that looks like for me right now is a spiritual director helping with a school of spiritual direction called Sustainable Faith in Oldenburg, Indiana right now. And I lead guided solitude retreats with Gail. And those are some of the bigger things in my life right now that really are in line with, I think, who God has made me to be as a listener and a lover of people.
Thanks so much, Joan. We're so glad to have you here. And Gail, will you introduce yourself to us as well?
Yes, my name is Gail Donahue, and I am also married. My husband's name is Bill, and we have 2 grown children who also live in the Chicagoland area. I live in Dundee, which is also a northwest suburb, but further west than Joan. And the things that have really filled up my life, and I have felt that God has uniquely invited me to participate in, is creating spaces for people to encounter God. And that looks very similar to what Joan is doing. I also am a spiritual director, and I also help out with sustainable faith, spiritual direction training. And I am a co-founder with her For Sacred, our ministry, which provides retreat space for people to come and encounter God. I also have the privilege of eldering at our church, which is the practice, which has been a very beautiful part of our journey as well.
Thanks so much, Gail. And I've loved getting to know both Joan and Gail in different contexts. Joan, you may know from her involvement with our tool of One Life Maps. She was such a core part of that tool and the development of it and training facilitators for that tool. And so she's worked with us as that tool is now part of what we do here at the Real Life Process. And both Joan and Gail, as they mentioned, are leading along with Sybil Towner, who is also one of the founders of the MAPS, the Sustainable Faith cohort that I'm a part of now. So I've gotten to have a lot of interaction with them. So it's a special delight to have them on the podcast today as well.
And I'm really thrilled as well that I've gotten to be a part of the Sustainable Faith training. We have so many threads always. We were talking offline. This is the first time Gail and I have gotten to be in person, which is virtual. So I don't know if that counts.
I will let it count.
But it is just always so beautiful sometimes to just see how threads and paths cross and how God goes before to say, I see what's coming and I know. So this is another one of those moments.
Absolutely. we want to get into talking about this practice of retreat. And before we talk about what you do with others, I would love to start by hearing from each of you what your personal experience has been with the practice, not only of retreat, but silence and solitude, which really goes along with that practice. So, Joan, would you share with us first?
Yeah, I think the best way to do that is to go back to the beginning, and you'll hear some humble stories probably from both Gail and I on this. I don't think I really knew what it was. And I happened to be we were going to Willow Creek Church at that time, and there was a women's retreat called Soul Feast. And they dove into all these spiritual practices over a course of many years. And there were breakout sessions, and I got to the table late, and the only one left was a silence and solitude. To be honest, I was disappointed because that is not the one I wanted. And so I got there, and actually Gail was a part of the teaching team on that. And if I had to name my word going into it, it was resigned. I'm like, okay, I'll go here, Lord, but I'm not happy about it. I came away to be with all these women, and here's where you've led me. And out of that experience, and we had some time together, but then we also had some time apart. And out of that, I remember there was this like experience with a piece of clay actually that you took out into your solitude time and came back again. And God turned that word resigned into the word beloved. I still have this little clay heart that has the word beloved written across it from I don't even know how long ago. And that word has just been melded into my heart, and I need to remember it and rehearse it and come back to it. And it started with that first experience where I came in as resigned.
Thanks for that, Joan. I feel like many of us can relate to that resistance to the practice that can come up. And so I love hearing how God met you right where you were at as you learned that practice. So
Yeah.
thanks for sharing that.
Beautiful.
What about you, Gail? What was your experience like with these
Well,
practices?
Mine probably is also a very humble story. It's always humbling to tell the story, but mine probably started a few years before that when I was in Dallas. I lived in Dallas, and we had just moved into a new house. I was married. We had a brand new baby, and I was working with IBM, and I was leading groups at our church and meeting with my friends and helping them deal with all their issues. And I don't know, somewhere along the line, it all became too much. And I remember coming home one Friday, spinning all these plates all the time. And I just remember sitting down on the couch, holding my son and thinking to myself, I'm at a wall. I'm hitting a wall, and I cannot do any more. And so when my husband walked in, I remember looking at him and saying, I need to get away this weekend. Away. I mean, by myself. And I had no idea what solitude was. I also grew up in a church environment where solitude and silence were not part of it. Retreat was going away and doing crafts and lots of teaching and staying up really late and eating a lot of candy. That's what and he looked at me like, okay, she is really serious. I can tell. And he found a friend and his wife that were going away, and they offered to let me stay in their home for the weekend. And he took on the baby, and I left and just went to this home. And I remember on the way saying, I'm not going to call you. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to listen to my own voice, because my own voice is going 90 to nothing with all the things I should be doing, I should have done, all that. And then I quietly said to the Lord, and I don't want to hear your voice right now either, because I'm frustrated with you. Because, Lord, I'm doing all the things that I think you want me to do. Don't you want me to do all these things of taking care of people and leading in church and my husband and my son? And so I went through the litany of things, and I remember getting to this house, and literally I did not speak a word for the entire weekend. I just needed rest and peace and quiet. And you know what? God was so gracious. He really didn't say a thing to me. And I often think of that and I start laughing. But at the end of the weekend, I knew that he'd been there. And when I got home, I knew that he had never asked me to do all those things. that is what I assumed because of what other people expected or what I expected or my church upbringing or my life upbringing. And it was such a striking moment. I left in desperation and I encountered him and came back restored.
Mm.
And that's when I started to, what was that? I've never had that and I'd been a Christian for quite a few years. And I began to fumble around and figure out, what does this look like going forward? So that's, again, very humbling, just total desperation led me right to where I needed to go.
Thank you,
Mm.
Gail. I love that honesty of you were in a desperate place and God met you there, maybe in a way that you would never have expected, but he met you in that place. And I love how in both of your stories, it wasn't even a practice you were familiar with, but something in you knew that's what you needed was that space and that silence.
Yeah. It reminds me, Lindsay, of, what we've talked about in the first few episodes of this series of it's going to look probably ugly and messy, like resistance and hit the wall, whatever, which is exactly what usually causes us to go, as you said, Gail, like, I got to go. I don't know why. I don't know where. So as we've led up to even this podcast of this series, like, this is what we've been saying and you guys are affirming.
Yeah.
It's going to feel awkward and weird. And what should I do? What should I take with me? It
Right.
may actually come totally out of crisis, and that's
Mhm.
okay too.
And no matter what, like, God is going to come running down the road
Yeah.
and meet you. Whether you come stumbling and resigned and exhausted and don't even know why you're there, like, he's going to meet you. Or if you come and this is a regular rhythm that you do.
Yeah.
And I love that we have a father like that we can come home to again and again.
Always welcoming, always.
Mhm.
welcoming.
Yeah. So you described it in your stories a little bit, but I would be curious to hear from each of you if you had to define what exactly is the practice of retreat and why would you say it's important for our life with God?
I would come back to it's set apart space to be with God, but it's intentional, right? And the retreats that we do, it's an extended piece of time where you put it on the calendar and you're looking forward to it, and God is looking forward to it, and you're pulling away from the noise and the busyness and the people and all the voices that are in our life to be with Him and find rest.
I would add that it is a time when you come away and are reminded. I often say that what God does in solitude and silence and retreat is that he reminds you who you are and what he intends for you, what he's telling you to do, but what he intends for you, which is very different. So it is like Joan said, it's about coming to rest in him, but it also is a place to refrain, to remember. I always say re-member, put this together and reminds us how he created us to be so that we can then go forward. Sometimes we come away to retreat and we find this beautiful place of rest, and God meets us in the rest, in our naps, in our sleep. And sometimes we come away because we need for him to reframe something for us, to remind us what we're about and who we are in the kingdom. And so that space allows for that to happen.
I think the other thing that comes to mind as you talk, Gail, because I love that being reminded part, like literally being reminded too of, and we tell people this every single time they come to retreat. There's two things that we can guarantee. There's not a lot of things we can guarantee in life, but I can guarantee these two things when you come, and they're very simple. And it's that you are loved. Today, God is going to remind you that you are loved, and you need to remember who you are in that. And the other thing we can guarantee is that he's there. He is there with you today. And I hope that alleviates for some people the fear or trepidation they might have going into a half day or a full day like that. but sometimes I just need to be with him and let him remind me in my walk or in creation or in the person I meet at lunch that he loves me and he's here.
Thank you for sharing that. It's so freeing to hear those two things that you said, because I know for me, sometimes I can go into retreat, like you said, either with a fear of God's going to show me all these things that I'm doing wrong, or I have this expectation that he's going to give me this really specific word or thing that I'm supposed to do. But I love how you said that it's about his presence with us. It's about him reminding us who we are and who he is. And that feels so inviting to me.
We always add on to that the one thing we know is we don't know if he's going to give you a word. We don't know if you're going to walk away with a plan or see something revolutionary or revelationary. What the word is, revelation. But we do know that you're going to walk away knowing that you're loved, and that is enough, So it's just a beautiful space to recognize that, which we don't have in our normal everyday lives very often.
I do think the interesting thing about learning to add retreat into our everyday life is then, I don't know if it's which comes first, the chicken or the egg, but when we create the big space, then we see more desire for the smaller spaces of, oh, I've got 30 minutes this morning to sit on my porch and watch listen to the birds and the flowers, or I've got a whole day to practice Sabbath, which is that retreat we're invited to every week. Like I said, I don't know which comes first, but it's almost like if you experience it and just sit in that space of God loving you, you're like, how do I get more of that? You start to crave the practice of smaller times, a day a week, if all those things start to build on one. I don't know if it goes this way or that way, but I just know it all belongs.
Teresa, the interesting thing that you said there is like you started by saying something about adding this to your rhythm, and which is so funny because you might be adding it to your rhythms, but it's really a practice of subtraction, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Willard has some quote about that, but it's just like we get so focused on what do we need to add. Maybe it's more the math problem's more of a subtraction one.
And we can't put something in unless we take something out. So there's probably, and I think that's one of the hardest things we've talked about already and we'll continue to talk about in this series, is there's the pre-deciding of, if I do this, what am I not going to do? So an add and a subtraction. Yeah, I read that quote before too.
I would love to hear more about, you all create opportunities for people to get away and to go on retreat in a way that is a little more guided, but still gives them space to simply be with God. So will you tell us about Sacred, about what it is, how it came to be, and just your heart for creating that space for people?
I'll start. You come in, Joan. It started actually way back 12 years ago. We were teaching a class on spiritual formation at church. And part of the class always included a time of solitude. And honestly, we took the stance that everything we did in that class was to prepare them for that time to be alone with God. That was the best of the best, right? So our teaching, our quiet, we would do a practice ahead of time. And so we began to do that. And what we noticed over a year or so of doing this class is the changes that were starting to happen in these women. And some of them would come up and say, I don't have anything like this in my life. We're talking 25 minutes, maybe 30. And where I am alone with God without something to check off and do. And we began to see changes happening in them. And fast forwarding, we were both in spiritual direction training at the same time. And we just started thinking, what would happen if we were able to create a larger space of time? I wonder what God would do in people's lives. And that's where he just hooked us. And both of us started wondering about that. And we went away for a day and we talked about what would that look like. We got to know each other a little better. And And the next thing we know, we both are looking at each other. Oh, I think this is going to happen. I think we were both scared to death, to be honest. And we thought, well, it'll take months to get a website and we'll have to figure out some kind of brochure and that'll take another 6 months. So we don't have to worry. We have a good year or so to get ready for this. To just fast forward, that did not happen. Literally in weeks, we had a friend who is a graphic artist design the very same, not a brochure,
Image,
image
logo.
for us. And it was perfect and it's beautiful and it captures our heart. My life is sacred, period, all of it. And then within a couple of weeks, we were taking a trip down to another retreat place. And another friend just called up Joan, I think early one morning and said, I'd love to design your website for you. And we're like, oh my gosh. And she did. And so I think we went away to talk in August. And by, was it October? November, we had our first retreat.
Awesome.
So fast. And that's when I think, when you agree, we both knew that God was so in this and he was just propelling this along, saying, yes, I want my children to have time with me. Go on.
And sacred, like we love, I don't know, we both came to that word pretty quickly because it means set apart for God. And we wanted to create spaces for men and women and ministry teams and nonprofits, like for people to be able to set apart space to keep company with Jesus. The verse that we loved and based this all around, the Matthew 11:28-30 from the Message. And it says, are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me, work with me, watch how I do it. Keep company with me, and you'll learn the unforced rhythms of grace. And for us, they're like, yeah, that names it. That names our desire, and God sees me and how hard it is. And he promises he's going to show up with rest and rhythms, and he will be there with me in it. And so that just became the core for everything. And our retreats are day long, and they start in community and they end in community. And our rhythm of the whole day has pretty much stayed the same for 12 years, to be honest. We just insert new content and themes. I don't know. God had prepared it because it was just an extension of what we were doing in our class. And we spend a good hour or so just slowing, and we call it a time of preparation. And a lot of people are like, okay, I'm here. Like, I want to go do my solitude time. And we're like, let's slowly put the brakes on and not have everything come flying forward in the car. And let's not slam into those speed bumps. Let's see where God wants to slowly take us. And so we do that together with a lot of just little practices in the morning and some scripture and a little bit of teaching around a theme. We're just trying to open up some doorways and invitations for those that are there. And then they've got the nice big chunk of day in the middle. We always pick a retreat center that has just beauty and walking and creation and water and indoor spaces and outdoor spaces. We're very particular about where we go. And they can meet for spiritual direction. There's other experiences. We want them to use like all of themselves, body, mind, and heart, and all their senses. So we give lots of options and say, just pick one, see what God might have for you today. And then at the end of the day, we come back together in community. So you're not alone, essentially. And there is some guidance, which I think is beautiful. And I love doing solitude in community because I love seeing Teresa out on the path and going, oh, there's Jesus, going to pray. And then at the end of the day, we come back together, and it's for a time of reflection, of naming and noticing what God has done individually, but collectively. I love thinking about how God gathers groups. In particular, this group will never be together again, but let's see how God wove, just like we talked about at the beginning, wove the thread through the day and for the people that are there. And so those are our day retreats. We do other things for ministries. Maybe they just want a half day and we'll do that for them, or we have some overnights. But that's the essence of what a day of solitude might look like.
I would also add one thing we say every single time. We provide stations for them to be guided by if they need it, because we know that some people come scared to death. What am I going to do with a whole day and nobody's talking? And what if God doesn't show up for me? And so we provide options, like we'll have visual meditation stations, or we'll have art stations for them just to use color if they don't have words, or we have a listen to my life station. We have all these options, and then we share them. And at the end, we always say, but we only have one rule at Sacred, and that is you do not have to produce anything. And usually we hear this sigh, McCloy,
For
literally.
sure. Yeah.
And they're like, oh, you mean I don't have to come and show you my picture, or I don't have to show you what verses God gave me? I can if I want, but I don't have to. I think that is such a beautiful pushback, rebellion against the noise and chaos of this world is, oh, we stop that. We are going to be with God and enjoy him. So that's just such a big part of, like what Joan said, just setting the circumstance, setting the space so that they can encounter God in whatever way they need to, which is just fascinating for us to listen to at the end when we harvest up their answers and they tell us what they did. And we're just, oh God, you are so good. So good.
And I think the other thing too, Gail, as I think about what you said, is at the end of the day, we didn't solve any of the things that they carried in. Some of them might still be there when they go home, but they met God and they were reminded of who they are and that they were loved.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to when we were talking about our expectation of what a retreat is for, because so many times we think, okay, what am I going to get out of this? And it's that producing something, and it's trusting that we are going to receive something, but that it's not about an outcome. It's about simply being with God and enjoying his presence. And I love the space that you are creating for people, because I think there are so many, and I'm sure you encounter them at your retreats, that this is a new practice for them. So we might say, go practice retreat, go practice solitude, but someone might not know where to begin. So I love that you give them enough structure, enough guidance for them to feel safe and invited to spend that time with God, and that they're not doing it alone, that they're doing it in community, even as they are having that time of solitude with God. So that is just such a gift that you offer people. So I know there are those listening who are curious to learn more and want to know, how do I join you for one of these? What does it look like for people to join with what you do at Sacred? Where can they learn more? What are maybe some retreats that you have coming up that they can connect with?
So they can go to our website, mylifeissacred.com, and that's the best way to find out about upcoming retreats. And there's resources there, or how we could partner with you at your church. We have retreats in July and September right now, July 11th and 12th, and September 12th and 13th, that are already up there, and you can register. So we would love to have you join us. And then we do an Advent retreat, that those dates are there as well, and a Lent retreat, which are overnights. Those happen to be just for women, but all the other retreats are for men and women.
Yeah.
And do you also have some self-guided options on there as well, and other resources? Can you tell us a little bit about that? If someone can't join you in person, what resources do you have to help them on their retreat practice?
We have several self-guided retreats. They come from retreats that we actually did in person, but we converted them so that somebody could take them and use them on their own, where they do have a station option, a visual meditation, or they have a lectio that we actually do an audio for, so that they're led in a quieting time and releasing what's in their body, mind, and heart. We guide them through that. And the teaching is on there also as an audio, so they can take a walk in creation and listen to it. But we give them the guidelines of how to create space in your physical space, but also in your mind and heart and body, and to go away from the places that you find words that will keep you from being totally present. And so there's several of those that they can choose from. One I know is on transitions, one is on the sower and the seed, and one is on God questions. And also we talk about spiritual direction on our website. We offer that during Sacred retreats, and we also offer it as outside of Sacred. So if anybody is looking for that place too. And we have a resource of resources that we offer that we've just come across, books or quotes or good references that they can use in their times. One thing I want to say about what we offer at the retreat as well, and what we hope for in our website, is that we want them to experience this, but we also want them to know that they can do this on their
Yeah.
own. And so what we give them at the retreat is an envelope, and it has devotional cards that Joan and I have written. It's way too much for a retreat. But our hope is that now you have 3 or 4 more retreats that you can feel guided in, that you can use on your own, that this isn't something that is only somebody can lead you through. The important part of this is a rhythm of living that Jesus invites us into. So
Absolutely.
hopefully our website is providing those type of resources for people and options.
As you both were sharing about the guided part, I don't think I would have experienced retreat on my own, just in my personality and how I'm wired as a doer. Stopping wasn't in the cards back then. And only because I had been involved in Transforming Center with Ruth Haley Barton, which you start with, it has the getting away part because I was going to Chicago every 90 days, but it also started with the silence and solitude time. I don't think if I had tried to practice it alone. So the fact that you offer that it is a getting away so that someone can experience that to bring it into their rhythms of their life, I think takes a little bit of the fear out of it, or depending on your personality, right? It could be from fear or it could be from resistance, as Joan, you were sharing in the beginning of, nope, not doing that. So I think it's both of that accountability. There's a little bit of accountability that comes in community that I think is actually a beautiful thing. So that part of doing community together on a guided gives you maybe the courage to then do it again on your own.
And then to make it a rhythm, you bring up a
Yeah,
good
and then to
there.
create it.
We do talk about that at the end of the day. Like, we don't want this to be a one-off, even if it was hard. Like, it's a practice, and they're called practices for a purpose because you need to do it. It's like piano lessons.
Right.
And it's not so pretty in the beginning, and sometimes it's clunky. But we just so desire to invite people into the rhythm of coming away.
Yeah. We talk about it much at the process in our framework of rule of life is that retreat, the getting up on the balcony, so to speak, and being with God in that way. So many things start as an experience. We do it once, as you're saying with sacred. Then it becomes the habit, maybe. But then when that habit moves to a rhythm and a spiritual retreat, it's like, how did I ever do this life without? And
You
so
start to crave. You start to crave it.
yeah, you are.
There's
It's
something
a
inside.
little bit addicting if you're listening. Like,
You taste it and you want more.
exactly.
Yes, absolutely. I'm just so grateful for the spaces that you are creating to invite people into that practice and just that companioning with them, of walking alongside them as they encounter the presence of God in new ways and maybe in a solitude space for the first time. As we're closing, I would love to hear from each of you if someone is feeling drawn to this practice of retreat and maybe it's new for them. What is one piece of encouragement that you would give them as they consider trying this practice?
I think I would say it's the intentional part. Like, just put it on the calendar and go give it a try.
Yeah.
I have a friend who, I think her birthday is the 17th, and the 17th of every month, she just holds. And we can talk about retreat. You can read about it. There's all kinds of good books, but you really just need to experience it. And I think that's why at the end of our retreats, we're like, we want them to experience it, and then we're going to talk about it. And then you start to discover what that rhythm might look like. So as I think about it, let's just put it on the calendar. Let's be intentional and just let God surprise you.
That's really a good thing to remember. I would also just say, off the top of my mind, I'm thinking how important transitions are to go into retreat. And if you don't know that you're going to run up against all the thoughts that are crossing your mind and fidgeting and all the stuff that happens, because honestly, we are addicted to noise and chaos and busyness in our life just by being part of this world. And so when we go away, I always say we have to go through withdrawal. Let all of that start tumbling out before we get to that place where we go. And it may mean that you have to fidget and think, and all those thoughts come to your mind, and you write them down to get them off, and you may just get so tired at the end of that you just need to sleep. And for people to know that is a spiritual practice. God has made us to sleep and rest. And sometimes I know for myself, when I go away, I know that's going to be one of the first things that happens to me. I get through the transition of all the noise and I start slowing down, and all of a sudden I'm just exhausted. I have finally learned that I can go to sleep. God's going to be with me in that sleep as much as he is with me when I'm awake. And so I just think knowing that helps you to avoid the guilt of, oh, I can't do this, or the shame of, I'm not a very good Christian, I'm not good at this. This is all of our journey. And then there's a transition back home. And to know that, be gentle with yourself as you leave these long, quiet spaces. Try to keep things simple for the first night. Don't try to, okay, I'm going to do all the work I didn't do, but gently move back into your life. And then just share grace everywhere, to the people you come back, to yourself when you get irritated. Don't let the enemy steal what God has given you, the seeds planted in your heart, because he has, and you'll start to see them growing roots and leaves and blooming in beautiful ways. We hear this over and over for people that come back to our retreats up to a year or two, and they'll say, back 2 years ago, God planted the seed in me, and I have seen him grow it now through these years. And what a beautiful thing that is to really look forward to and have hope in.
Beautiful.
Well, thank you both so much for that encouragement, and even just the tangible things that we can do to prepare for retreat and to, like you said, Gail, re-enter daily life is such a part of that too, is so important to pay attention to. So thank you for that. I know that as I listen, I'm learning so much, and I know our listeners are too, about how do we make this a regular rhythm in our life? What does it look like to get away on a regular basis? So I know that people will want to connect with you. And so we will have links in the show notes for mylifeissacred.com, but you can find that in the show notes to connect with Joan and Gail and hopefully join them on one of their retreats and check out the resources that they have there. Also want to let you know, in our show notes, we have ways that you can connect with us at the Real Life Process. We are on YouTube now, so you can find our podcast there. We also have a free resource you can download that just has some ideas and next steps that you can take as you are considering how to incorporate the practice of retreat into your life. Also want to let you know that in our membership community, this is a great time to join. We are starting a new book in July called Journey of the Soul, that is all about stages of faith and what that looks like as we grow in our life with God, and is full of practices and things that we can do to grow our life with God as well. And so all of that is in the show notes, so check that out. Gail and Joan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
It's been such a gift, and thanks for sharing your wisdom and for the work and the ministry that you do. And thank you for inviting us and our listeners into it as well.
It has been a joy just to be with you and share. So thank you.
Yeah.
So many good takeaways. Oh, I've got some things written down that I'm going to do. So many good things.
Yes.
Thank you both.
You're welcome.
Yes. Thank you so much. And thank you all for listening to this episode, and that we hope you'll join us next time as we continue talking about the practice of retreat, as we listen to Jesus' invitation to learn the unforced rhythms of grace in our everyday, ordinary life. We'll see you next time.